to Freshly Served, the healthy vegan cooking show. I'm Heather, and tonight we're going to make a Spanish flavored dish with some garbanzo beans, which is the exact same thing as chickpeas. It's just in Spain they call them garbanzos, so because we're using Spanish spices, we're using the Spanish name. And some eggplant. We're gonna do it baked, so I've got my baking dish ready. I've got a lid for it, and I'm going to get the oven started at about 350. So I've got my chickpeas all ready to go, and I am using canned chickpeas today. Chickpeas are one that take an awfully long time to prepare and cook. They are well worth the effort, but sometimes you just don't have time and you gotta use the canned. And that's alright, just look for a can that does not list salt as one of the ingredients. And the cans that I get also are cooked with kombu, which is a seaweed, which helps break down some of the proteins in the beans while they cook so they don't give you so much gas. Alright, so while the oven is heating up, I'm going to chop up my eggplant. When you're looking for an eggplant, you want it to be purple, and you want to make sure that there aren't any brown spots on the outside, because that's going to be where there's a bruise. So all you do with an eggplant is just chop it up, and I am going to cut it into slices and then probably cube the slices. And you can see on the inside an eggplant is white. Ooh. So things got a little crazy trying to fit it into the baking dish, so I had to resort to using a second dish to mix this in. Just got the eggplant and the chickpeas in a mixing bowl. I've got some onion diced here that I'll throw in as well. And then I'm going to add a couple cloves of garlic minced up. And I'm going to chop up this fresh parsley that I have here. Once you get all of the stuff into the bowl, so I've got eggplant, chickpeas, onion, garlic, and parsley. Then you need to drizzle a bit of olive oil over top. This is going in the oven, so it needs to be protected from the heat. If you don't put oil onto your vegetables, they're going to get a hard outer coating and they won't actually cook. They'll just dry out in the oven. And the best way to mix it up is with your hands, because then you can make sure it gets all over the vegetables with the least amount of oil as possible. You want to do that first, the oil, before you add the salt and the rest of the seasonings, because the salt's function is to draw the moisture out of the vegetables. But if you do the salt before the oil, the juices of the vegetable will just leave it and it'll lose all of its flavor, whereas if you do the oil first, the vegetable's juices will only go as far as that barrier of oil, and so the flavor stays in the vegetable. So I've got some salt, I've got some black pepper, and then for our Spanish flavors, I'm going to do some paprika. I'm going to do some cinnamon, just to sweeten it up a little bit, some ground cloves. Ground cloves have a bit of a peppery flavor. They're quite strong, so if you don't like them, you can just leave them out and use a little bit more black pepper. And then a little bit of cayenne, just for some added spice. Now, last but not least is a lemon. And anytime I use lemons, I like to zest them. So here we go. Zester, as I always mention, is available at your local thrift store for probably a couple bucks. If you don't have a zester, you don't want to go to the thrift store, you can use a grater. Just be careful, because you don't want to go too far into the skin of the lemon. If you get to the white part, it's very bitter. That's called the pith. You don't want to be using that bit. And then chop your lemon in half. Ooh, this one's got a lot of seeds. And then you just stick the zester in there and squeeze. And I like to do a strainer so that I don't have to worry about the seeds while I'm squeezing. And there we go. Mixing the spices in you can do by hand or by spoon. And at this point I'm starting to wonder how I'm going to fit all this back in my baking dish, which is probably why I usually mix it up in the baking dish. But, you know, worst comes to worst, I can just use a second dish. So, get this all stirred up. You can add more or less seasonings depending on your tastes. I like quite a bit of paprika, but not so much cayenne. And I really like the sweetness of cinnamon. That's a nice dimension. Okay. See how we do here. Oh, it's gonna be close. And remember, the eggplant will shrink as it bakes. Eggplant is one that's not a good candidate for steaming. Gotta bake it or saute it. Well, I don't know how I'm gonna stir it when the time comes, but I'll deal with that when we get there. So put the lid on, and in my case, I have to squish the lid down and pop it in the oven. And you do not have to wait until the oven preheats, but just keep in mind that if you put it in before the oven actually gets up to heat, it's going to take a little bit longer to cook. So pop it in there, and then give it a check at about 15 minutes. Give it a stir, make sure the juices are all covering the vegetables, and then it should take about 30 minutes to finish cooking. So as I suspected, it was pretty difficult to stir earlier on. It's been in there for about 30 minutes now, and the eggplant is softening up really nicely. Because I have this packed so tight, it is taking a little bit longer to cook, and I like a really soft eggplant, so I'm going to put this back in for a little bit until it is done. There we go. I'll probably leave it in for about another 10 minutes, and then I will be ready to serve it. I'll probably have it with a green salad, which is always nice. You can find the recipe for this dish at healthyveganrecipes.net. I'm Heather, and this is Freshly Served.